Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the quarterback situation again. Russell Wilson should be back and should start against the Bills, but is there more pressure on him than we thought there would be to make sure that he earns that starting role? That film study notes on the offensive line and Cory Trice Jr. talk all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Steelers fans, let's indeed get into it. So I've had time to go over some of the all-22 film for the preseason game. We'll get into some more of my notes on the offensive line. By the way, I have a film study piece that should be out by the time that you're watching this show or listening to the show on Monday for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on Zack Frasier and Troy Fautanu. You'll get some of my notes that'll be from that in this episode. But I want to get back into the quarterback talk here because as much as there have been talk about Brandon Ayuk, this is still maybe the most important thing to watch right now for the Steelers as far as what's going to be expected of this offense in 2024. Yes, the offensive line huge, but Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, the whole new quarterback room and how they're doing with Arthur Smith's offense is a talking point. And as I had been saying all throughout training camp, and I think that people always mischaracterize words to hear what they think they hear, but I have always maintained Russell Wilson is QB1, Justin Fields is QB2. Justin Fields improved during training camp. It even impressed while he improved. Never overtaking Russell Wilson, but showing that the gap between them was lessening and lessening. And I think that also with this Texan game, even though the offense did not get into the end zone when Justin Fields was out there, I think with this Texans game, it furthered my point that Justin Fields is getting closer to where they want him to be to at least properly challenge Russell Wilson. And with that, I think there's more pressure on Russell Wilson to perform this week. Now, the Steelers did practice no pads on Sunday. I wasn't out there. I was taking the day to kind of take a breather here at home. But I was also recovering from shout out to Barrel and Flow Fest. If you were out there, by the way, if you were one of the fans that said hi to me at Barrel and Flow Fest, thank you so much. It means a lot to meet a lot of y'all out there. And it's always means a lot when someone says that they love the work. So thank you to everyone who did get to see me out there at Barrel and Flow Fest. But getting back into to Justin Fields, again, you look at his performance, what was asked of him in this offense. He wasn't the reason that the Steelers offense wasn't scoring on Friday. He was, and we can go into whose fault it was between him and Nate Herbig on the two snaps that they bobbled. But as far as the main part of the offense that we were all saying Justin Fields needed to improve on, his timing, his work with the progressions, his footwork in the pocket, all of that looked much sharper than it did when we saw him coming into training camp. And all of that, I think, puts him in a much better position to handle this. I want to go back to this time I asked Mike Tomlin before this game even happened what he felt like was some of the biggest progress from Justin Fields. Listen to how Mike Tomlin answers this question because I do think it's kind of telling as far as what Justin Fields is really improving on.
Like we've seen out of Justin Fields for weeks now, getting a lot of changes. What's the biggest thing you see growing?
I think we're still writing that story. I like the attention that he brings to the things that we're trying to get done. He's really been focused on his lower body in the pocket, for example. He's done a nice job of that. But we got a lot of ongoing projects, things that we're focused on in terms of getting better, and he's doing a nice job of it.
So that quick blurb there, when I was just asking for what he felt that Justin Fields improved the most at, and you see he went to the lower body work. And to me, that is acknowledging that Justin Fields is doing, he's doing the things for his head to be sharper, for his mental game to be better. But part of that means he also needs to control his lower body. As we know, Justin Fields is a very athletic quarterback. He needs to, he doesn't need to, but he can get out and run, and he can make big plays that way. But he shouldn't have to always do that, and he should learn how to balance that. And the first step of learning how to balance that is controlling himself so that he doesn't get happy feet in the pocket. And I don't think we saw much of that on Friday. In fact, again, the 2 sacks that happened on him weren't on him. They were pressure that was given up rather quickly from both times Troy Fautanu, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But you look at, by and large, the only pass that he threw that wasn't complete was the one to Van Jefferson that was actually a catch. And, and several of these passes downfield, good reads, well-timed, some even done while under pressure to make a throw with a defender in his face. So all in all, I think Justin Fields has shown up. But all that being said, Russell Wilson, this is still his job to lose. But I think there's much more pressure because of the progress that Justin Fields has made that Russell Wilson needs to actually not lose this job. Because now I don't think the Steelers are nearly as worried about putting Justin Fields in as they would have been maybe the first week of training camp when we were talking like, I don't know what's going on here. He needs to get better. But I think, listen, Russell Wilson should go in and do it. And look, this is not me saying that Russell Wilson's scared or worried. This is a guy who's a 9-time Pro Bowler. He's been in several playoff games. He's won a Super Bowl. He's lost a Super Bowl. He's won NFC Championship games. He's a guy who knows how to respond in big moments. So, the things that this is like what we were talking about, how with Kenny Pickett and young quarterbacks over the past few years, the Steelers have looked for. How you respond in practice when there's pressures on you is a good sign of how you can respond in games when there's pressure upon you. And Russell Wilson has shown it several times over. He does well under pressure. He delivers in big moments. He steps up. That's oftentimes when he's at his best. And I think that that's going to be the case with this quarterback battle. I think Russell Wilson's going to go in and show that he's still the guy. Now, the Steelers on Sunday did do a 2-minute drill. He didn't take part in that, but he did lead the offense in 7 shots. Granted, they didn't do well in 7 shots. Defense played pretty well, but we also saw notes, and again, I wasn't there, but notes that Russell Wilson was firing passes down the seam, looking pretty sharp in practice. I think as he gets his chance to work more and more with the first team, you'll see him develop more of that rapport with George Pickens, with Van Jefferson, with Calvin Austin, the guys who we've seen Justin Fields develop connections with in the early weeks of training camp as he was getting to run the first team. But again, I think Russell Wilson, he needs to show it. If he comes out and has a bad showing, we may be having a different conversation about the Steelers quarterback plans this time next week. Again, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Russell Wilson's going to be fine. I think he's going to perform well, and he's going to show why the Steelers wanted to get him in free agency and why they made him QB1 right out of the gate, even when they had Kenny Pickett on the roster carrying over from last year. I think that he's going to be that guy. But again, my point here is, in this Bills game, he better show up, because I think that Justin Fields is a lot closer to him than many thought he would be going into training camp. With that being said, we want to take a quick break. When we come back, I did my film study work. You can read my film study work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, but I'm going to talk about some of the things that I noted about the difference, about what we saw out of the 2 rookies now that we've had time to review the All-22 and Troy Fautanu and Zack Frasier. That's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role that you're looking for. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open for the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats these days and might not have the time or resources to hire. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here. I want to dive into a closer review of what I saw from Zack Frasier and Troy Fautanu in the Steelers' first preseason game. But first, we'll also go into some of the notes that we now know from training camp. As we noted, the Steelers came in towards the end of their press conferences after the game and made a kind of note that, hey, Troy Fautanu has a knee injury. We'll give more details later. And there was some worried voices there in the room, like, whoa, or concerned, I guess would be the word, because Troy Fautanu did tear an ACL in college, and there was some wonderings about, would that be a serious injury? But we now know it's a knee sprain, according to Mike Tomlin. He explained it. Troy Fautanu is expected to miss this upcoming game against the Bills, but not expected to be out too long. So that's a good sign for him. It's only going to be a short bit of time for him. So with that, he won't be out. But I did a film study again, you go to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. It should be up by now. It might be up in the middle of the day on Monday, but it'll be out there for you all to look closer at the film there. Now, again, the reason I can't show film on this channel is because it's against the rules. We're not allowed to do it. But I will talk you through the things that I did see. I want to start with Troy Fautanu. As you saw, he did give up 2 sacks, although there's some people who chart it differently, that he wasn't the main impetus of the second sack. The first sack, he definitely was. And the things that I saw when I was able to actually look a lot closer at the play, I thought the things were just simple, fundamental things that will be easily corrected when he gets to work with Pat Meyer, because we've seen Pat Meyer work with guys like Broderick Jones to correct these things. And I think that's where it'll just be on Troy Fautanu to embrace the coaching when he comes back from injury, to make sure that they're not a problem, because these are also things that we did not see be much of an issue during training camp. The first sack happened when he went up against Danielle Hunter, and if you don't know who Danielle Hunter is, he's one of the better edge rushers in football. He's gotten I think he's been a Pro Bowler in 4 of his last 5 seasons. The only year he wasn't a Pro Bowler was the year that he was hurt for half the season. So there's that. But on the first sack he gave up, he just sort of stopped in his dropping back, and I think that he took, his first anchor step wasn't too big, and then his second step to drop back kind of stopped his progress moving backwards, and he kind of stepped out to the side a little bit, and that allowed Hunter to kind of just naturally get behind him a lot quicker. He wasn't able to get his hands on him without causing a holding penalty, and Hunter just easily ran around the rookie for that play. And again, I think it was just more of a matter of just misstep in his drop back. Stuff like that happens, especially with rookies. A small mistake there. Then the other sack happened because against Jerry Hughes, another very experienced NFL defender, not nearly the accolades of Danielle Hunter, but still a really talented guy who's been in the league for like 15 years or something like that. But on that play, it was Troy Fautanu. He got the footwork down, but then Hughes cut inside of him on an inside move. And when he did, Fautanu just didn't get his hands up in time. That allowed Hughes to kind of get his hands into Fautanu's chest, push him back, and create the lane open to Justin Fields there, which didn't allow Fields to escape the pocket. So just the 2 things there on those. I did see Fautanu show good technique in other pass reps. I think he had 12 total and allowed those 2 sacks in those moments. So not a great rate there, but I did see him do the fundamentals. I think those are very fixable things. They're not things that I would be, truly alarmed about unless they become a trend in the coming weeks here for the Steelers in training camp. But in the run game, I thought he did pretty well. He didn't have the really highlight, mow him down kind of block that you kind of look for sometimes from offensive linemen, but you did see him move out in space and do well. In fact, there was a pitch play to Najee Harris out wide where the Steelers had guys like Van Jefferson crack down on defensive ends to push them inside, while Fautanu pulled outside and got a linebacker, and he did pretty well. He got out in space, showed his athleticism, and was able to do well out there. He also had some good seals here and there in the run game. That's also where I thought Zack Frasier looked really good, was in the run game. I also say Zack Frasier looked pretty good in the passing game too. He didn't give up a single pressure, and I think he was in there for at least 18 passing plays, if I remember those numbers correctly. But in the run game, that's where I saw Zack Frasier doing pretty well. He had a couple plays where he would get to that second level really quickly, get on his linebacker, wall them off and kind of put himself in the right position to give space for Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren to complete their runs. Also saw him in the hole at the line of scrimmage, getting guys off the ball. I thought that he did a pretty good job at that, and that's where he gets to show that wrestling background, that leverage to move guys out of the hole and use that space. And that's where I thought the biggest difference was between him and Herbig, was he was able to move guys out of the hole, and he was able to go get guys at the second level if there wasn't anyone to have to move out of the hole. Those are good signs. Now, again, it wasn't, completely polished and spectacular. There's stuff to work on. I think the biggest thing, if there was a note that I had for Zack Frasier to improve upon, it's just finishing a little bit, because when he was getting to that second level, he was getting to the linebackers, but he wasn't crushing them. He wasn't kind of controlling their space. And in fact, there was a 9-yard run where he got to the linebacker and he holds the linebacker up, does his job so that Warren can get to the second level, and that leads to the 9 yards. But if he bulldozes his linebacker, if he gets his hands inside, blocks him, turns him back to the inside, Jaylen Warren might have been able to turn that from a 9-yard run into maybe a touchdown, knowing Jaylen Warren and his home run speed. But still, the fact that he's doing those things, a good sign for Zack Frasier. And I think that those are the things that you want to see from your rookie center as he's getting his first NFL action. And also, we got, the reports are that from training camp, again, I wasn't there Sunday because I was taking a day off, but reports are he's with the first team now. It started off with Nate Herbig, but then Zack Frasier spent most of the day practicing first team, which is what we said might happen after this game, based off of how Herbig struggled with snaps and didn't look too good, and even when the snaps were good, and Frazier didn't struggle with snaps and looked better, especially in the run game. So good signs for Zack Frasier. I thought that I was rather impressed by him in his first start. We'll see how he carries that over this week in practice, especially when they put the pads back on. And then, of course, against the Bills in this next preseason game. But we're also not done talking about some of these offensive linemen, because I also thought there was one other player that stood out to me as far as a young offensive lineman, and that was Spencer Anderson. He started in at guard for Isaac Seumalo in this game, and he played both left and right guard as the game went throughout. It was also Mason McCormick. We'll talk about him in a sec. But I was really impressed by Spencer Anderson. He did have some mistakes here and there. There was one time he tripped over Herbig's leg on when he was supposed to be pulling and trapping a defensive tackle. But he was a guy who was helping Frazier move people in the middle part of the field. I saw him getting out in space and blocking. Spencer Anderson, he's supposed to be the versatile, multiple available offensive lineman that can help in several different positions. And I think he did just that. I think that he looked pretty solid there. Again, nothing to say that, they should, trade James Daniels and Isaac Seumalo. They don't need him. They don't need them anymore. But Spencer Anderson, his MO was supposed to be a versatile offensive lineman and one who could fill in and do a good job. And I think he did just that. As for Mason McCormick, I saw some moments where I think that he also did well. I think he had, I think he was less polished than Spencer Anderson at points, but I had really no major complaints from him throughout the game. I thought Mason McCormick was pretty solid in general. He had, I think, 16 reps against the pass, allowed 2 pressures there. You want him to be a little bit better there, but by and large, I thought he did fine. In his first game, because Mason McCormick's another guy that they're hoping that can develop kind of quickly at the spot, and he doesn't have to start just yet, but he can do well. I think he played 33 snaps according to Pro Football Focus on the day. But by and large, I thought outside of Fautanu's pass protection struggles, which again I think are very fixable, I thought the offensive line. The young offensive line, I think as a whole, the offensive line needed to be better in this game. But the young offensive line showed things that I think are things that you can work with, and the things that Pat Meyer can build from as an offensive line coach to help get that foundation so that they can start from a good place in week 1 with the regular season and keep building as the season goes on with Arthur Smith's offense. Because that's another part of this that I think people need to understand with the expectations of this offensive line, is that it's not going to just come together overnight. It's going to take time for this group to gel. It took time for Marquise Pouncey and David DeCastro and Marcus Gilbert and Ramon Foster to gel. It took time for that group to kind of took time for the mid-2000s Steelers offensive line with Alan Faneca and Marvell Smith and Jeff Hardings and those guys. It took time for them to come together. So it's going to be a work in progress. But I think that the things that we're seeing that could be good signs of their potential, I think there's good signs there. What will tell how good this group does is what steps do they take forward. Mike Tomlin talked about that being one of their biggest challenges, and the things that they're looking to build upon this week. We won't see it for Troy Fautanu, but we'll see if we see that progress from guys like Zack Frasier, Spencer Anderson, and Mason McCormick. But we got to get out of the offense for a little bit. I want to talk some defense and Cory Trice, who could be moving up a little bit. Some excitement there. We'll get to that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, that's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP that brings home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here going over what we're seeing with the Steelers after their first preseason game. I want to highlight the cornerbacks for a little bit because there was a guy that some people were asking about that I wasn't able to really get to during training camp because he was kind of being worked slowly back in, and the Steelers, I think, were finding the comfort level of things with him. But that's Cory Trice. And Cory Trice, of course, the 7th-round pick last year's draft, the 2023 draft, who looked really good for the first week of training camp and had a really bad injury. It took him out until really around like springtime that he really got back, was able to even start practicing at all. And the Steelers were kind of taking it easy on him the first couple weeks of training camp. He wasn't going in full pads. He was kind of not rotating in for a whole bunch of reps. And I think they've now taken those training wheels off. I think Cory Trice has gotten a good chance to play a little bit more. And we also saw it because he played a decent bit in the Texans game. And he wasn't a guy that I was paying all that much attention to at first because I was trying to evaluate 7 different guys, and he only had about 7 plays in coverage total. But in those plays, he looked pretty solid, and there was only one time he was targeted. When he did, it was a tackle for loss, and he did a pretty good job with it. And now on Sunday, he was running with the ones next to Joey Porter Jr. while Dante Jackson rested. So that's a good sign for Cory Trice. A guy that at a position where they have guys like Anthony Averett who could play on the outside. They have other guys that can mix in there. But Cory Trice was a guy that I think that a lot of people were hopeful could bounce back, get back to where he was, and show that he's making progress, and maybe eventually be that number 2 corner that lines up with Joey Porter Jr. And who knows, maybe this week we'll get to see more of that if Dante Jackson's given the week off to kind of rest from whatever injury he might have suffered, because I think he only played 2 snaps in this first game as well. But if Cory Trice can be that guy, again, his body build, his build, and the type of cornerback that he is very much the prototype as far as the Steelers have been kind of looking for long, tall, fast, physical corners like Joey Porter Jr., like Cory Trice, and also like Darius Rush, who also I think will factor into this cornerback situation. But I think it's going to be interesting to see, Cory Trice go up, what's he going to be like when he goes up against George Pickens, a bit more in camp? What's he going to be like when, he goes up against this Bills offense this week? Will he line up with Keon Coleman and all their top rookie they drafted this past year? I think that there's still some questions to solve there. But by and large, I think these young cornerbacks, they've loved to be physical. They love to press guys. We saw Joey Porter Jr. He got rung up for another defensive pass interference penalty in this past game. I think he needs to show a bit of improvement in these upcoming weeks. Not that he's in danger of losing his job at all, but just to show that he is improving and that he can be the Steelers' number 1 corner this season, who does take away number 1 wide receivers regularly, because the Steelers, they need that out of him. That's why they drafted him to be that guy. But if Trice can just be that number 2 guy that eventually fills in for Dante Jackson, because remember, Dante Jackson is really only under contract for 1 year. So even though we've liked what we've seen out of Dante Jackson as far as reporters when we talk about him. The Steelers don't exactly have him locked up for the future. So if Cory Trice could come in and be that guy, they have 2 more years under his rookie deal. So that would alleviate having to spend some money at that position and would be a good spot. But also in that mix is Beanie Bishop, who I thought was also pretty solid when he was out there in the preseason game. I thought that he was a guy. He was he did give up some catches. I think he gave out 3 receptions in the game, but he wasn't all that out of position. I thought he was kind of being in the places that you needed him to be. I'll be interested to see how he continues to grow with the secondary when he gets a second week to work on, because that's the other thing here is like where I'm doing my film study. The Steelers are doing all their film study, and they're looking at everything they're trying to do, everything they're trying to work at. And I will be at Steelers camp today. This is the Monday episode, so I'll be there at camp today to get to talk to players, see more of what they're working on, and see if we see any other steps forwards and improvement points for the Steelers on both sides of the ball. But again, the cornerbacks, that was kind of the group that I think going into spring camp, going into training camp was like, okay, how would this group look? Can Joey Porter Jr. be CB1? Can Dante Jackson be CB2? Can they find some of these young corners to step up into these roles and be solid backups and have a good depth chart there? And if they can't, then what does that mean for this defense? Because I think there's a lot of confidence in the linebacker position with Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts and Peyton Wilson. We know that there's confidence in the edge rushers with the way they're getting after the quarterback. The defensive line, we think that we've seen good signs from Keanu Benton and DeMarvin Leal while still having Cam Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi. And then the safety position is good because they got Minka Fitzpatrick and Deshaun Elliott, who I do think Deshaun Elliott, he had a good play, but he also had a bad play. I think he was mostly in charge. He was mostly responsible for the Tank Dell touchdown that happened. I think he was out of position in a zone. But by and large, the safeties, there's a lot of confidence there. If the corners can be a really good group that can take away receivers and make life hard on passing offenses, again, it just goes back into my whole theory that this could be one of the best defenses in the NFL, not just circumstantially, but also overall and recognized to be just that. We'll have a lot more from Steelers training camp throughout the week. I'll be there Monday in Latrobe. That's actually 2 more training camp practices at Latrobe before they come back to the South Side and do their inter-team scrimmage with the Bills I think that's Thursday. But I'll be there Monday and Wednesday. The Steelers will be off Tuesday, and we'll keep you up to date with all of that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, including that film study I referenced in that second segment on Zack Frasier and Troy Fautanu, where you can read more about that there. And of course, find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel for more. We'll see you again tomorrow with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.